Rain whispered against the towering panes of the skylight atrium, a steady, soft percussion that blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and silver. The office was a cathedral of glass and steel, but at this hour it felt more like an abandoned palace, silent, cavernous, every shadow stretching longer than it should. Elena Ward sat hunched over her glowing monitor. The blueprints for the Meridian Hotel's new wing sprawled across her screen. Her eyes burned from hours of focus, her fingers cramped around the stylus she used to refine every line and curve. She hadn't meant to stay so late, but she'd been chasing perfection, something she suspected Damian Cross, the CEO, demanded without ever needing to say it aloud. She glanced at the clock in the corner of her screen. 9:14 p.m. A hollow pang went through her chest. Everyone else had gone hours ago. The open plant floor was a darkened sea of empty desks and slumbering monitors. Even reception, always manned, was dark. Packing her bag, she crossed to the elevator and pressed the button. Nothing. She pressed again. Still nothing. The unlit numbers above the doors stared back at her, indifferent. Her phone was dead black screen. No chance to call anyone. With a tightening knot in her stomach, she turned toward the stairwell, hoping for the satisfying clunk of a latch. Instead, the handle resisted, cold and unmoving, locked. The silence deepened until she could hear her own breath, then faint, deliberate footsteps. Not hurried, not hesitant, measured, coming from the far end of the hall. Her pulse quickened, body half turning toward the sound. Out of the dim glow stepped Damian Cross. Not the immaculate man from the boardroom, no razor-sharp suit and pristine tie, but dark slacks. A white shirt unbuttoned at the throat, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms. His hair, usually precise, had softened around the edges as if the night itself had coaxed him into this state. For a moment, his eyes held hers, unblinking, as though assessing not just her presence, but the reason she was still here. "You can't leave," he said finally, his voice low, even. "The system locks everything at 9. She blinked, unsure whether to laugh at the absurdity or ask why no one had told her. "I didn't." He stepped closer, the faint scent of rain on fabric. Following him, elevators, stairwells, exterior doors, all locked. He glanced past her to the stairwell, then back, his gaze steady enough to still her. Before she could respond, he reached past her to the hallway door. The deadbolt clicked into place with a sound that seemed far too loud in the empty space. "But," he said quietly, "there's one room that doesn't." Her mouth was dry. "What room?" Instead of answering, he gestured with a small motion of his head, a silent invitation. The weight of the moment pressed against her ribs as her heels echoed after him down the corridor. He didn't speak, didn't glance back, just walked with the same deliberate pace, leading her to the far corner of the floor where a single door stood ajar. Damian stepped inside, the soft glow of a single lamp spilling across polished wood and walls lined with books. She hesitated at the threshold. Then his hand pushed the door closed behind her. The lock turned with a heavy, final click. The air in Damian's office was warmer than the rest of the building, holding a faint trace of cedar and something darker amber. Maybe that made Elena's pulse quicken. The low light from a desk lamp caught in the sheen of the marble, the gleam of leather-bound books, the glass decanter on a side table half filled with something the color of fire. Damian moved toward his desk, not in a hurry, but with the kind of measured control that made her more aware of her own breathing. He didn't speak at first, just watched her from across the room, as though waiting to see if she'd bolt. "You work late," he said finally, leaning a hip against the edge of the desk. His shirt gaped open slightly at the collar, revealing the hollow at the base of his throat. "It's a big project," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I wanted to make sure the design revisions were right." "I've seen your work," he said, his eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. "They're always right." The compliment should have eased her nerves, but instead it only deepened the strange current running between them. He straightened, circling the desk, the low lamplight shifting over him as he came closer. "You've been here almost a year," he said, his tone thoughtful. "And in all that time, you've avoided me." And she began, but he cut her off with a small shake of his head. "Don't deny it. You drop your eyes in meetings. You hold your breath when I walk past. You act as though I don't see you." Her throat went dry. "And do you?" His gaze didn't waver. "I see you more than you think." The quiet that followed was thick, broken only by the rain against the glass. Damian took another step forward, close enough now that she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, smell the faint burn of whiskey on his breath. I asked myself, why? He went on softly. Why would someone as capable as you make herself so small in my presence? Her pulse was pounding so hard she almost didn't hear him when he added, I think it's because you're careful, and careful people, his eyes dipped to her mouth, are the easiest to undo. She should have stepped back. She should have made some excuse, laughed it off. Instead, she stood rooted, caught between fear and an ache she didn't want to name. His hand lifted, not touching her, but hovering close enough to her wrist that the heat of him seemed to curl into her skin. Tell me to stop, Elena, he murmured. She opened her mouth, but the word never came. Something in his eyes shifted, approval, hunger, maybe both. He stepped behind her, and she felt the brush of his breath near her ear. You never let anyone close to you here, have you? Not in your space, not in your head. She swallowed hard, unable to answer. Then maybe, he said, his voice low and deliberate. It's time you saw what happens when you stop being so careful. He moved past her to the glass wall, where the city's lights stretched into the wet night, reflections shimmering around them. When he turned back, his gaze locked on hers, unblinking, and for the first time she realized the door behind them was still locked in. He had no intention of unlocking it any time soon. Damian's shadow fell across her as he came to stand in front of the glass wall, the city lights shimmering behind him like they were there only to frame him. Rain slid in silver rivulets down the panes, the sound steady, hypnotic. He didn't rush toward her. He simply stood there, as though measuring the distance between them and deciding how to close it. Elena, he said, and her name in his voice was different now, lower, heavier. Do you know why I keep my office locked when I'm in it? She shook her head, unsure if she should speak. Because in here, he went on, I don't have to follow the rules everyone else sees. In here, it's just me, and whoever I choose to let in. His gaze sharpened. Tonight, that's you. Her heart was loud in her ears, each beat an echo. He took a step closer, not enough to touch her, but enough that she could see the way his pupils had widened. I've watched you in meetings, he said softly. You speak only when you're sure. You don't waste words. You don't give yourself away. A pause. That's a rare thing. She wanted to tell him it wasn't intentional, that she simply hated being wrong, but the words wouldn't come. Not under the weight of his focus. He took another step, slow enough to give her the chance to move back. She didn't. Careful people, he said, carry entire worlds inside them, and they don't let anyone in. Maybe they shouldn't. She managed. A faint curve touched his mouth. Maybe they should if it's with someone who knows what to do with what they find. Her breath caught when he reached up, brushing her hair back from her face with the back of his fingers. The touch so light it was almost imagined, but it was enough to make her lean forward, ever so slightly, as though drawn by a current she didn't understand. He noticed, of course he did, and his voice dipped lower. If I touch you now, you won't think about anything else for the rest of the night. The challenge in his tone sent heat to her cheeks, but she didn't answer. Elena, he said again, this time closer, tell me to stop. Her silence was its own kind of permission. He moved behind her, his presence a wall of heat at her back. Look, he murmured, tilting his head toward the glass. You can see yourself, your eyes, your mouth, the way you're breathing faster now. She looked, and there she was, her lips parted, her chest rising more quickly than before, and his dark figure behind her like a shadow she couldn't escape. One of his hands hovered near her hip, not touching, still careful. He whispered, but not for much longer, and then, with a precision that made her dizzy, he stepped around to face her again. His hand went to the door. She thought for 1 second he might unlock it. Instead, he turned the bolt the other way, sealing it even tighter. The sound was final. You stay, he said quietly, until I decide otherwise. The rain had deepened into a steady, insistent rhythm, the kind that swallowed all other noise, wrapping the room in a cocoon of sound. The golden light from Damian's desk lamp seemed to pull the two of them into a smaller world, one where the rules outside the door no longer existed. He didn't come at her all at once. That would have been easy to brace for. Instead, he moved with a deliberate patience that felt more dangerous, like he had all night and knew she didn't. He crossed to the side table, poured something dark and amber into a short glass, the clink of ice loud in the hush. Drink, he asked, offering it out. She hesitated before taking it. the cold crystal brushing her fingers against his. The contact was nothing. A passing touch, yet it sent a shiver straight to her spine. Damian didn't move away. He stayed close, watching her over the rim of his own glass as he took a slow sip. Do you know what I think about when I see you? Her pulse was uneven. No, that you spend every day holding something back. He said, you keep it under your skin, behind your eyes, like if anyone saw it, they'd take it from you. She glanced toward the door. Maybe I like it that way. His smile was brief, knowing, maybe. Or maybe you've just never had anyone who could take it and give it back to you better. He set his drink down without looking. The sound of glass on would sharpen the stillness. Then he stepped into her space. So close the air between them seemed to vanish. Do you trust me? He asked. She wanted to say yes, but the truth tangled on her tongue. I'm not asking if you should, he murmured, leaning it just enough that his breath warmed her cheek. I'm asking if you do. Her eyes flicked to his. I don't. No. That's honest, he said, and something about the approval in his tone made her knees feel less steady. One hand rose, slow and unthreatening, until his fingertips hovered just beneath her chin. He didn't lift her face. He let her choose to meet his eyes. When she did, his gaze held hers with unyielding focus, as if they were the only two people left in the world. Careful people, he said softly, always think they can step back before it's too late. You can't. Her breath caught, and she wasn't sure if it was fear, desire, or both. He tilted his head toward the glass wall again. Look at yourself. She turned slightly, catching the reflection of her own flushed face. Her shoulders tense, but leaning forward, and Damian's dark shape so close behind that his breath stirred her hair. His hand moved not to her face this time, but to the door. The metallic scrape of the bolt sliding was louder than the rain. Only when it clicked into place again did he whisper, now no one comes in and no one leaves. He stepped in front of her fully, closing the last inch between them until she could feel the heat radiating off his body. You can walk away, he said, his voice low and certain. But if you don't, I'm not letting you pretend tomorrow that this didn't happen. And with that, he waited motionless, every nerve between them alive, letting the decision hang heavy in the charged air. The silence between them stretched until it became something physical, thick, heavy, pressing down on her chest. Outside, the rain blurred the skyline into a dreamscape of fractured lights, the kind that made time feel like it had slowed to a single, suspended breath. Elena's hand still held the glass he'd given her, but she no longer felt its weight. Her pulse was in her fingertips now, in her throat. In the space where Damian stood only inches away, she didn't move, she didn't speak. It was Damian who shifted first, not a step forward, but a lowering of his gaze, as if to make her aware of every place his eyes lingered. Her mouth, the delicate hollow at the base of her throat, the line of her shoulders beneath the soft fall of her blouse when his hand came up again. It wasn't tentative. His fingers brushed beneath her jaw, a light touch, but with a certainty that told her he'd already decided what he was going to do the second she stopped resisting. You've been waiting for someone to see you, he said quietly. Not your work, not the way you keep your head down and make everyone else look good. You. Her lips parted, but no answer came. His thumb traced her lower lip, slow enough to make her shiver. And now that I do, you can't hide from it anymore. Her breath came quicker. She could hear it in the small, almost inaudible space between them. Elena, he murmured, are you going to walk out of this office? Or are you going to see what happens if you don't? Something in her, the same something that had kept her cautious for years, tried to push back, but it was drowned out by the deeper, sharper pull that had been building since the moment the door had locked. She didn't step away. Damian's eyes darkened, like he'd been waiting for that exact flicker of decision. His other hand slid to her waist, firm and warm, guiding her back until her hips met the edge of his desk. The glass in her hand was gone. She didn't remember setting it down, and then his mouth was on hers. Not a tentative brush, not a testing of limits, but deep and claiming. The kind of kiss that left no space for doubt. Her hands, which had been tense at her sides, lifted almost without her realizing, gripping the crisp fabric at his shoulders. He kissed like he spoke measured, deliberate, but with an undercurrent of heat that threatened to burn straight through her. When he pulled back, barely an inch, his breath was warm against her cheek. You understand, he said, that if you give me this, I take all of it, not pieces, not what's safe, all. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Then take it, she whispered, The sound he made was low, almost inaudible, but it vibrated through her bones. His hands moved, one sliding up her spine, the other bracing at her hip as he kissed her again harder, deeper until she felt the edge of the desk dig into the back of her thighs, and knew there was no way back. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside that locked office, the storm had already begun. Damian didn't rush. That was the most dangerous thing about him. He moved like a man who already knew the ending, and it was only a matter of time before she did. The rain outside softened, each drop streaking down the glass like slow tears. But inside his office, everything sharpened. His hands were steady as they framed her face again, tilting her head so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. His eyes were dark now, not with anger, but with something deeper, more consuming. "You think I'm still deciding," he said quietly, his voice carrying that edge of control that made her spine straighten. "I'm not. I decided the moment you didn't walk away." Her breath caught, the words landing with the weight of inevitability. He leaned in, brushing his lips across her cheek. Not quite a kiss, more like a claim, and the warmth of it made her grip the edge of his desk for balance. He stepped even closer, the faint press of his body against hers a promise. "I told you I'd take everything," he murmured, "and I don't give it back." One hand slid down her back, slow and unyielding, until it found her hip, anchoring her in place. The other trailed along her arm until his fingers threaded through hers, pinning her hand gently to the desk. It wasn't force, it was a quiet, unshakable certainty that he had her now, and she was letting him. The kiss that followed wasn't the same as before. The first had been a claiming. This one was deeper, hungrier, as if he were searching for the part of her she'd never shown anyone. His mouth moved with deliberate pressure, coaxing her into answering in kind, until she felt herself leaning into him like the ground had shifted beneath her. When he broke away, it wasn't to retreat. It was to watch her, really watch her. Her lips parted, her breathing uneven, her eyes just a little too wide. A slow smile touched his mouth. "There you are," he said, like he'd finally uncovered the thing he'd been after all along. Before she could ask what he meant, his hands lifted her effortlessly onto the desk. The cool marble beneath her contrasted with the heat of him as he stepped between her knees. He didn't kiss her right away. Instead, he let the silence wrap around them again, his thumb stroking the inside of her wrist as if testing the rhythm of her pulse. "You've been careful for so long," he said, his voice almost too soft for the words to be dangerous. "Let me see what happens when you're not." Her answer wasn't in words, it was in the way she leaned forward, in the way her knees brushed against his hips, in the way her fingers tightened on his shirt. That was all it took. His mouth found hers again, but this time there was no hesitation. His kiss deepened, his hands mapping her body with a precision that made it clear he'd been imagining this far longer than she had. The rain outside, the locked door, the city lights, all of it dissolved into a single, consuming moment, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew the truth. She wasn't careful anymore. Not here, not with him, not when every inch of her was already his.